Hello, people, and everything across every spectrum known to mankind. I am Jason, Jedi James Dean. You got Pierce Walker, Gianmarco. We're all here welcoming you to another Storm Gang podcast. What's up?
All right. Yeah, welcome. How you doing? Good week for you guys?
I'm hyped up on like caffeine and adrenaline. I'm not like the weather man right now.
Yeah. All right. Later on in the episode is going to be joining Gianmarco.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about Ish.
Yep.
He's coming in again, and we will see him in about 5 minutes.
Yes. Hopefully looking forward to another great discussion. I'm sure in a lot of our radars today is the testimony in Congress that wrapped up a couple of hours ago with the heads of Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. I wasn't able to catch the whole thing. I saw the recap, but I saw some of the questioning, and it was pretty worthwhile, of course. Definitely the biggest tech hearing since Bill Gates in the 90s.
Yeah. It covered quite a wide variety of topics. And actually, honestly, I would say it's rather entertaining. If you enjoy this podcast, you'd probably enjoy the congressional hearing, what I heard of it.
Oh, God, we're as boring as a congressional freaking.
Oh, you're right. I just said that. The Storm Gang podcast, as interesting as a congressional hearing.
Wow.
That's a compliment to one of those groups.
Okay, I quit now.
Yep. Actually, I've got a clip or a portion of the hearing ready if you guys want to hear it. So, yeah, he asks about Chinese government espionage, like corporate espionage. Like you guys have heard of this.
That was someone not last week, the week before last. Who was the viewer who was asking about that espionage?
We had a couple of people in the chat that were asking about it and bringing it up. So yeah, like you guys are aware of this as a topic, as something that is generally well understood to be happening. So here, let me play the clip here, and we'll talk about it in a second. So, sharing screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for all four, yes or no answer. Do you believe that the Chinese government steals technology from U.S. companies? Start with Mr. Cook.
I don't know of specific cases where we have been stolen from by the government.
So you don't believe that the Chinese government's stealing technology from U.S. companies, or you're just saying that not from yours?
And I'm saying I know of no case on ours where it occurred, which is I can only speak to firsthand knowledge.
Mr. Pichai?
Spineless.
You believe that the Chinese
that was the classic, like, oh well, I don't know anything about it. Absolutely spineless.
Wow.
The government steals technology from United States companies?
Congressman, I have no first-hand knowledge of any information stolen from Google in this regard.
Mr. Zuckerberg?
Congressman, I think it's well documented that the Chinese government steals technology from American companies.
Thank you. Mr. Bezos? You're on mute.
Mr. Bezos, I believe you're on mute.
Yep.
Jeff Bezos doesn't even know how to use a computer. This is hilarious.
So of all the different products that Amazon carries, you haven't seen that in any of the companies that sell products on Amazon or your company yourself?
Oh, well, certainly there are knockoff products, if that's what you mean. And there are counterfeit products and all of that. But the Chinese, if the answer is the Chinese government stealing technology, that's the thing I've read reports of but don't have personal experience with.
It's no secret that Europe increasingly seems to have an agenda of attacking large, successful U.S. tech companies. Yet Europe's approach to regulation in general, and antitrust in particular, seems to have been much less successful than America's approach. America is a remarkable nursery for innovation and entrepreneurship in pursuit of the American dream. As you all know from direct experience, this is a country where it's possible to start a company from a garage or dorm room and experience tremendous success. Do you have any recommendations on how Congress can better protect U.S. firms and U.S. companies from aggression and government intervention abroad, not just in Europe, but in China as well? Anybody that would like to
Watch
chime in,
this.
I'll open it up to any of you.
Fucking crickets.
None of you have any recommendations on how Congress can better protect U.S. companies like yourself? All right, well, now I'll yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Gates.
That
Thank the gentleman for
just
yielding. Mr. Zuckerberg,
happened.
what is a digital?
That just happened.
So we basically are billionaires who are in charge of all of our data and security are saying there's absolutely no way to protect the American consumer or our own corporations from China because China is just that damn powerful.
Yeah, there's a bit. All right, so before we really delve into it, we're gonna add Ish to the stream. I know he caught the edge of it. How you doing, Ish?
Hey, I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Glad you could join us, man. So I think the clip we played is like, I mean, of course we just saw it happen, so we know that it can happen. But can you believe that? You can't, like, twofold. One, how none of them had any recommendation. I am shocked by that. And two, of course, all of them but Zuckerberg just completely kowtowing to going like, oh, I don't know of any Chinese involvement because that's where their financial stakeholding is. Like,
I want to make
this.
I want to make two comments on the first question.
Sure.
First of all, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's of note that companies of that size, especially their CEOs, I'm not, of course, accusing them of anything, but when you're at that size, plausible deniability becomes easier when you're at the top. Because there's just so much going on under you as the company grows that, you know, if you just, that's why CEOs, the bigger the company, matter, because just the way their character is kind of in a way setting not just environment but instructions to go down as to what you can and cannot do, as so long as I'm not looking, so to speak. And the second point is Zuck's answer was strong in terms of a PR perspective, and it really helped that not just one person but two persons answered incorrectly before him.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And here's the thing. Zuck's answer actually was the perfect middle ground because Ish is the lawyer. He could have even better chime in on this if my opinion is correct. But he didn't actually say, oh, yeah, we've seen Facebook get attacked. You know, he did not make any direct accusation. All he said is, I believe it is incredibly well documented. You know, he did not actually directly make an accusation or directly say that Facebook was under attack. He just said, yeah, this shit's happening and it's very widely understood. You know, but it was also direct. It was short, concise. You know, like, honestly, he scores mad points. You know, if this is like a thing that we're all rating with our little placards up 10 points or whatever.
Yeah, maybe Facebook stock goes up tomorrow. You know,
that would actually make this like a lot more like, you know, congressional hearings a lot more interesting if it was like the NBA dunk contest. Where you had, like, judges just sitting on the sideline and you gave everyone in attendance like placards and stuff and you have a good answer. You just like see the like number go up. I think it would like sensationalize the entire congressional hearing and you would just get so many better responses.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm aware, well, I mean, I'm not that aware actually, but you know, there are public hearings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe we should set up our own placards.
Yeah, or maybe we should live stream next time something like this happens and have our own little cards on the camera to see what your responses are.
Well, no. We want like Bezos and like whoever else is testifying to be aware that they're, you know, this is happening. That way they give better answers because they want to beat everyone else. You know?
Oh yeah, with millions of people tuning in for sure.
It's just
C-SPAN, you know, the market share is maybe 100K at most.
This whole like, you know, and I'm not surprised that they don't really have an answer, because their whole business model, their whole approach has been to expand data access, right? In like every single way possible, because they all make money from selling your data. You are, you know, like you are the product, you know, and you are the product that they sell. So surprise, surprise, they haven't really invested in keeping you safe. And then keeping you safe from what, right? Where do you draw the line? Right? That's another very like interesting question we all need to ask ourselves, right? Would you guys say like it would have to be like a Chinese government actor that we're now going to restrict Google from like selling like ad space and ad data to, or Facebook or any other respective tech company? Or is it a Chinese-based corporation with like ties to the CCCP, or is it going to be just Chinese corporations in general because we all perceive them to have ties? I mean, because they're all part of the global marketplace, right? So where exactly do you draw that line and say, all right, guys, we need to insulate our data from this level of actor in relation to the Chinese government? I mean, I just want to pick your brains. Where do you guys think that the line should fall, right, in that gradient that I just presented?
Or alternatively, do you think that, hey, the company created the data and therefore they own the data, and that you don't own the data, even though it's about you? And alternatively, that it's their data and they can do whatever they want with it.
Wow. I would pay $9.99 a month for Twitter, and I don't use any other social network. So, you know, just for subscriptions, man. I'm paying for everything right now at this point. I'm fucking, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, Jason. I don't think anyone owns anything anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like, you remember when we used to like download stuff onto our iPods, and like I actually had like 230 songs that were mine, you know, and I used to like walk around. Right?
Here's the tricky thing about the terms in the user agreement and everything on like buying digital music and everything back in the day. I don't know if it's changed, but like I actually like tried to read the terms and agreement of like, you know, the Apple like iTunes store back in the day before, you know, it went to this subscription service. And you only actually lease the music through Apple for, I think, you know, until they decide that they want to end the contract. So you don't actually own that music. It's a lifetime lease for that 99 cents of a song until Apple decides, hey, it's over.
That is 100% true. In fact, there were several songs, Apple got sued on this. There were several songs that you might have downloaded to your computer, and Apple would actually remove it from your computer.
Yeah, like when Apple loses, like if you buy the music, lease the music, I should say, from Apple, and then they lose the rights to hold that music, like they did with all of what's her name, you know, the Shake It Off girl, you know, when she like stepped away from Apple Music for a while before she like made her triumphant return when, you know, Tim Cook paid her like billions of dollars. She had all of her music removed, and people who had bought it, thinking that they own it for 99 cents a song or $9.99 an album, Apple had to take it off of their service because it, you know, null and voided the lease that they basically null and voided the lease that you had for the music.
That's interesting. I don't know that. I mean, I know we're veering away greatly from Mitch's original question, but like just, you know, data ownership in general, like I'm the kind of person that thinks about my purchases as a time commitment that I give them. So something I use all the time, my computer, my phone, my bed, my shoes, like I understand the value of paying good quality for that because I want to, you know, use it, buy once and make sure it lasts a while, if not a lifetime. At the same time, there are other services that I use far less. So going back to Jason's idea, like, hey, I'd pay $9.99 a month for Twitter, and so long as I own my data because I use it all the time. Like, by extension, like data ownership is still a tentative thing, but I was just thinking about the possibility of, hey, why not, like, you know, at your Amazon checkout, you have the option to opt in, like, hey, would you want to pay 0.1% more or 1% more on top of this, so that all the metadata of your browsing for this item is owned by yourself, and we'll have to we won't be able to get it from you. And of course, that data would be automatically stored by, in this case, Amazon immediately as you're doing it. But I wonder if there would be an option, like, you know, kind of like your fees on top of I think your cellular service, like it goes to certain I mean, they're technically taxes, but they go to certain things that the government provides for you as a service.
Yeah, and it's just where does your data privacy protection come into all of it, right? How does it interact? Do we need to like create a specific portion of the FCC that we then devote to just strictly, you know, addressing data privacy issues? I don't think that would be a bad regulatory agency to have it.
I think we make it super simple. 2024, we elect Andrew Yang. He takes care of it all for us, and we all good.
Or like to to update my original proposal, instead of it being like something you opt into when you're purchasing an item, let's say you just opt into it in general in, like, for example, your Amazon account. Like, hey, would you like to pay, just for simple example, 1% more across all your purchases? So your browsing history is not, taken by us. It is something that you view only. Like, I think that'd be an interesting possibility in terms of exploring data ownership, because like if that were my case, like, okay, yeah, I'll pay 1% more no matter if I buy a floss for $2 or a computer monitor for $200. I know that all of my browsing for this won't be like seen by anyone else, essentially.
Here's the counter to that. The counter to that is, what if your data is being used? What if you're being micro-targeted? Isn't that more of a luxury? Doesn't that create a better browsing experience?
No, it does not.
Don't you want to be inundated with commercials for Gianmarco speakers, right? For like music stuff, rather than like, I don't know, Barbie dolls or something that you're definitely not interested in?
Give me the fucking Barbies.
Oh yeah, so it's finding the balance.
I don't want to see it again.
It does. I'm sure for a lot of people, it has made their consumers' experience, so to speak, a lot better. Like, sure, I want to see ads for certain things because I have interest in those things. Like, I wasn't aware of this new plugin for my application coming out, and now I do because there's an ad for that. But it's finding the balance between the two. Like, and the only thing, the main gripe I have about the way they use the data to sell us things these days, the main gripe is that there should be like a notice to, like, hey, I bought the thing already. I don't need an ad for 30 more computer screens. All right, like, I already bought one. I have no intention of buying one again anytime soon.
Some people
that definitely makes sense. No, go ahead, Pierce. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, some people buy multiples. So yes, you, the individual Gianmarco, don't need to buy multiple screens, but apparently, statistically speaking, if someone buys one screen, they're more likely to buy another screen. So they're going to get more advertising.
I think we should do it with items that, I think there should be some type of algorithm invented to where we do it with items that that you're going to like need more of, like condoms.
Yeah, that's not important. That's what I'm getting at. So like, they've already determined that the likelihood of someone buying a second screen is still higher from someone that bought a first screen rather than somebody that has not bought a screen. That's my point. So even though you're less likely to buy a screen because you just bought a screen, it doesn't change the fact that out of the 10 people that just bought a screen, one of them is more likely to buy a screen, and therefore you're all getting the advertising.
And it's still quite a targeted audience anyways, too.
Right.
That's true. Good point.
Yeah, Jason, you were quite, I think, vehement in saying that you don't want, you'd rather have the Barbie dolls and you don't want the computer screens or the speakers.
Yeah, it creates buyer's regret. Like, if you buy something and then you like see, oh, well, here's a better model that's like, only like $2 or $3 more, or you just buy like the latest iPad and then like Apple turns around and, well, Apple doesn't actually do this because they have a schedule, but like, let's say you buy the latest Android something, and then they like turn around and like, Samsung just released this one, and then like, what's another Android maker? LG comes out with another phone and you're like, you like it better, but you already bought this damn Samsung, and you're like, motherfucker, I hate myself. It creates this depression and this longing of want, and you're not always in that position to get it. So like, if you see the same thing over and over again, it's just going to make you depressed after your purchase, because you're going to see a better price, or you're going to see a newer model, or you're going to see a different model that's better, or you're going to see something with another feature, or all these things. And, next thing you know, you're like freaking hanging from the rafters.
But doesn't it have value that you're at least somewhat interested in the product? Rather than like,
I'm looking for a mental health standpoint. I'm looking to save, people who like regret things,
Oh yeah, and I had an experience with a coworker at the music school that I used to work at, and he was telling me how he just got this new synthesizer, this new gear, and then he was upset that like shortly after, like a month later, it was on sale for like maybe 10-20% off, and like, sure, the percentage is negligent, but the point is, like, I told him, listen, man, you basically paid a little more just to have it like for a month sooner. The entire month that you've used it, like, you've gotten a tremendous amount of value for that product already. like if you're first of all, technology and all consumer items are always going to get better, especially in the smartphone world where there's a lot of competition. There'll be newer and better things perpetually, all the time. And it's just about just finding the right a device for your needs at the moment. Like literally, it's like a car. The moment it rolls out of the shop, like it's used. Like it's not going to get any better than the moment that you get it. And not to mention all the mental space that takes, because for me, those take up a lot of mental space. When I'm researching something that I want, like the value of not having to use that much mental capacity thinking about which one I'm going to get is of tremendous value as well, and just to get it over with.
But you got to like look at it, the fact a car is a purpose and something that you like research and everything more so than anything else, and you're going to be happy with it, like regardless of the devaluation of it, or but like a large electronic purchase or something like that. That's something that like your friend who's a producer, he, a lot of producers don't make that much money. So if you're going to invest in that, and you're like, oh crap, I mean, and that savings like could be an extended warranty that he couldn't get, on the product, and then it breaks like a month after that, and he's like, damn it, I needed the product and it was this much higher, and but better deal somewhere else, and it's just.
But importance in it at that point, like it is something that was out of his control. Like I'm sure he couldn't return it anymore, and he already had it. Like there's no real reason to get upset about those kinds of things because it's a factor you couldn't have accounted for. Or
yes, logically there's no real reason, but people do. That's the thing,
and that's what we got to change. We have to get to a place where that isn't a problem.
Well, we need better mental health throughout this country.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to be in a place.
And this brings me up to actually a piece of Andrew Yang's platform, which I thought was interesting, and I know you guys were definitely involved with the campaign. I wanted to pick your brain on it, where Andrew kind of wanted to create specialized agencies or at least specialized task forces to deal with kind of social mental health dynamics that we're facing now because of like the increase in technology and because of the increase in how we're socially interacting with both products and other people, right? Like he wanted a task force for like social media regulation and social media action, right? So where do you guys kind of draw the line in tempering social media where it doesn't get into First Amendment issues of like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and how do you kind of draw that line, and how do you properly police social media to where it isn't as toxic as it's become now, evidently, but it's also not regulated to the place where it's harming free speech?
I see what you're talking about, because regardless of the medium in which the free speech is presented, like us having a conversation, that's free speech, and we are influencing each other, making us think certain ways just by us communicating with one another. Whereas if you have a smartphone with a very addictive game, like that's also communicating something, be it a feeling or an emotion or a way of thinking for the person interfacing and using it. And Andrew didn't want to just create a task force. He wanted to create an entire cabinet department for that. He called it the Secretary of the Attention Economy. And the fundamentals of it is basically all of these dopamine driving machines are just taking a negative psychological toll, scientifically speaking, on our minds. And it kind of borders into a public health problem in general.
I mean, it certainly is a public health problem, especially if we're looking at like the younger generation, right? I mean, a lot of people get bullied or bothered in school. Back when we went to school, that was a real easy fix. You came home and then you didn't have to worry about it until the next day. But like now, it's like, it's kind of constant, I suppose, for these kids to constantly be surrounded by these negative, toxic elements that are following them home with this, constant social media pressure, and then every phone's effectively a computer at this point.
Well, I think we should like really put a restrictive age limit on like social media. I don't think 12 and 14-year-olds should have like Facebook. I don't think 16-year-olds should have Facebook. I think you need to be.
What are your grounds for that? Why not?
What?
Why not, Jason? What are your grounds for that? Like, what's your grounds for that age cutoff? Right?
It's creating a safe space for our children. Like you said, like when we were in school, we could just come home to escape the bully. I mean, well, most of us could. I mean, my dad was a bigger bully than the kids that were at my school. I mean, he toughened me up.
Right.
Hey, what's up? But it's about creating that safe space to where the kids can come home and they escape, and there's not that constantness of like school like lingering over them. If you put that restriction on social media underneath that certain age, and then they get to make that collective choice when they're in college if they want to constantly have it. I think we introduce kids to social media at such a young age now that they're just kind of groomed to deal with it, but they shouldn't have to. It should be a conscious choice. Like right now it's not a choice. I mean, you have parents setting up fucking Facebook Kids for their infants and documenting their entire life on freaking Facebook. And I mean, Facebook started
sort of like a picture family book, right? Like your family photo album. I mean, think about it, like Facebook has become a multi-purpose platform, but one of those purposes for a segment of population that exists is the family photo album, which is how it actually like started as well. I'll point out,
Yeah.
So like it completely makes sense that as soon as my kid is born, even before they're born, I've got a Facebook account for them, and boom, look at all these baby photos, right? Like that is actually.
What's this movie with Tom Hanks and Emma Thompson? The wizard Harry, whatever the fuck girl was in that like covered this entire thing, like where they tried to make where it covered like and it was kind of set in the future, and it was like everyone was required to have social media and be plugged into it 24/7.
That's kind of like one of the episodes of
Black
Mirror, yeah. And let's hope we never get to that episode. That'd be disappointing, honestly. That'd be so disappointing if that's where we ended up.
Well, I mean, it's kind of almost where we are ended up. I mean, think about it. Kids are freaking using Facebook at such a young age now, and you have parents that are inflicting it on them, and and then it creates that thing. It allows for like, let's say you turn over the keys to your kid's Facebook at like freaking 12 years old, and then there's like that creepy freaking uncle that your mother said you had to be friends with, when she started the page. That's like, maybe a little bit too creepy now that you're 12. And you're forced to like deal with the harassment from him. It's just
this definitely touches on everything we've been talking about. But just to dial it back one little step, right? Back to what you were saying, Jason, with limiting access to Facebook for younger kids. I think that if you guys followed First Amendment case law, which is a very interesting branch of constitutional law. I think free speech and free speech protections are very interesting. I mean, there are lawyers that specialize very much in this area of the law. It's a really interesting branch of it. But if you go into it, it really is about the free marketplace of ideas, right? So if I was a Supreme Court justice and I was looking at your proposal, and say, for example, if Andrew did become president and has a cabinet position, and the person in that cabinet position puts up a regulation that let's ban social media access for anyone under 14, right? So 13 and up, hypothetically, right? There's no doubt that would get challenged in the courts, right? And that would probably be challenged on a First Amendment ground, and the lens that the court would look at it would be, is this an acceptable limitation to the marketplace of ideas? Because the way that the Constitution's been kind of like broken down all the way from its founding to now, and the First Amendment free speech right has been interpreted, is to allow everyone as much access to a marketplace of ideas as possible, right? So you are creating that limitation. So what the court would do then is to kind of create a balancing test to see if it's okay, if that would justify it. And really, the only type of language that has been limited by the courts are threats or fighting words, or words that like on their own incite violence. And I don't think that this is like a blanket free speech limitation on anyone under the age of 13. And I know they're not adults, right? But I don't think that like the adult minor distinction would carry weight here. I just don't see this being upheld by the Supreme Court, at least not in the way that the case law has been growing in this area up until this point.
I don't think it's much of a solution either, to be honest. I mean, as a rule of thumb, regulations tend to only be as strong as like they can be enforced, and oftentimes they're just erroneous, right? So like, let me put it this way. You want to go to a website. This website asks for your birth date to make sure that you don't see something, you know, untoward and that you're an adult.
You're talking
But
about
you're just 11 years old. What do? You put in, oh, I was born in 1987 or something, right? So that way you pass a check. Does that actually prove that you're of that age? No, it doesn't, right? There's ways, of course, that you can more stringently make sure that somebody is who they say they are, but those always have trade-offs, and that still also is just another thing besides the point. My point is that people that want to use a certain service, whether you forbid it or not, they're going to still want to use that certain service. Same thing with drugs, same things with alcohol, right? So just regulation, I don't think is really much of a solution in that regard.
Yeah, but you like it would help. Logically, it would have to help, and you know, it would have to help a little bit because we're looking at like rising, you know, teen suicides and everything, and it's because of the access to like constant, you know, social media, which you know,
you think it is.
And everything.
You think that it's because of that.
Yeah.
So there's a great many.
There's so many cases proving that, like there's like you know, kids kill themselves because they're being bullied online. Take the kids offline, and you know, maybe you know, rates like drop tremendously. You know, well, not tremendously, but at least marginally.
Kids have killed them. Not, I don't mean to sound so callous, but kids have killed themselves since before social media from bullying as well, right?
Yeah, but the rates are up, is what I'm saying, because of social media.
Well, no, again, you think because of social media is what I'm getting at. So there's a lot of things that have changed in the last decade besides the prevalence of social media in our culture. Now, I do believe that social media is a contributing factor towards a constant sense of stress or a constant sense of performance that people have to like have around themselves, especially as a kid. You know, there's you always have to be on, as it were. You know, and I do think that wears you down. So I would say that probably contributes to a rising case in suicides. But even before social media, this trend that you're talking about was already noticed and being documented. Before Facebook, before MySpace, just between the 80s and the 90s, we were already witnessing an increasing rise of child suicide. So I would suggest to you that social media might be a contributing factor, but it's not the contributing factor. Like it's just one of a greater societal shift. There is the prosperity paradox, I think is what it's called. It might be a different name. That basically says the more advanced that your society is, the more fortunate your first world country is, the higher rate of suicide that you have. And it's an interesting paradox because you would think like, wait a second, wouldn't that, you know, if life is better for everybody, wouldn't our suicides be lower, right? But no, it turns out that Nigeria has a way lower suicide rate than South Korea, despite being completely on different sides of the, you know, average prosperity of the average citizen of the two.
Suicide is a very complex topic, and there's a lot of different, you know, there's a lot of different components that go into someone making that unfortunate decision to end their own life. Really, I think a lot of it in the United States, personally, between what I've seen in the last 20, 22 years since living here, is this kind of erosion of community, right? I feel like the United States was to an extent more communal. You know, if you pull back 2.5, 3 decades ago than it is right now, certainly. And I mean, there's always a certain degree of you know, like a positivity or positive social contribution as a result of individualism, right? So I'm certainly not saying that we need to erode all individualism, but it's really this constant tussle between individualism and communality that comes into play when it comes to how much do you really feel welcomed and as a part of a group of individuals, and then how much, right? I mean, and actually on a completely different note, I think that lack of communality is why it's been so difficult to fight COVID-19 in the United States. I would say it goes far beyond. We certainly have the medical resources. We don't have an incredible public health infrastructure. If you look at, like a lot of the more socialist countries in Europe, right? I mean, one thing that those countries do have going for them is socialized public health care, right? But I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think it's the fact of I think it's a much more basic intrinsic element, which is how communally do people in society think or act? And in our society in the United States, it's close to or near to zero. We always think individually. So when we're called upon to act communally to even prevent the pandemic, that's just a thought paradigm that we're not even used to thinking.
Absolutely. No, I keep on saying it. Like, this pandemic, more than anything, you have to observe the fact that this is, and will be pushing American consumerism and individualism to its absolute limits. And
then I suppose, and it's so interesting to see these mask designs come up, right? It's like, oh, I can't be wearing the standard surgical mask that everyone else is wearing. I need to get my own customized mask. It's like, whoa, like we can't even agree to take communal action on something that's a completely communal action.
It's and honestly,
fascinating.
That happening should have been something I saw coming, because if there's one thing that will never let itself down, is capitalism, man. Oh my gosh.
I blame Etsy.
The moment you can make a competitive marketplace of something, like, people are going to be competing for that new sudden need or want.
I mean, it's a fashion statement.
Some masks, no, I got to give them. Some masks are incredibly well done. Like, horrible idea, very well done.
So masks have been commonplace in Japan and Korea and Taiwan before this most recent outbreak. It's just like, oh, I'm feeling a little under the weather, I'll wear a mask, right? Like, that's just where their culture was. So accordingly, you already had designer masks in those countries. Like, it's not like we're the first ones to come up with that. And I mean, that's because people want to be different. People want to, dress up how they want to dress up. And I see no harm in it. If anything, I think it's a good thing, because you're going to want to wear the mask more. And wearing masks,
it's like we wear clothes so to be naked, so might as well look good wearing them.
Right. Snapchat kind of predicted this entire thing, because you remember last year where everyone was taking the Snapchat filter selfies with the mask on?
Yeah.
I don't use Snapchat. So
I don't use Snapchat that much either, but I tried when it was a trend, and there was this special filter on it where you would click and it would actually put a mask over your face for whatever the fucking reason. So Snapchat predicted the entire mask thing. That guy should get a medal or something.
It really, and it comes down to, do we have too many choices, right? So I remember, and Gianmarco, you're gonna laugh, but the first time I noticed the new Coke machine was the Firehouse Subs across the street from UF campus.
Oh, the freestyle?
Yeah. The first time it went from your standard, you have 12 drink options and you press the thing and it pours, right? To that whoa, it looked at like a supercomputer the first time it came out, and there were 120 choices. And I knew people that didn't even like to eat subs, that went to Firehouse Subs to buy something, would just buy a little sub just to try out that machine. And it was the most popular thing on UF campus.
Dude, living on the East Coast, there was this place called California Tortilla that was just so freaking awesome. They had a freestyle machine, and it had 20 different soda options, and then it had 20 different options for every soda option, and you're just
And then
white, green, peach, mellow, yellow. I never knew I needed you in my life.
Yeah, or what about Diet Peach Mellow Yellow, which is a whole other thing, right? So it's just, but the reason I'm bringing this up, and that was a huge thing, and it was hugely popular, and now obviously those machines are everywhere. But it comes down to a question of do we have too many choices in terms of kind of like, how we could choose from a set of products? Do we now have so many, and this is more of like a marketing philosophy or marketing psychology question, really, which is, do we have too many choices to the point where it's making us unhappy because of that chase of individualism?
Oh, yeah.
Because bubbly fizzy sodas, there's never enough choice, and there's never too many. There's never too much soda. Period. In the conversation. But when it comes to like phones and shit like that, there should be two choices: Apple and Samsung. They're the ones who have perfected it. They're the ones who do it the best. Screw all the other phone makers.
I would strongly disagree that Samsung has perfected the Android smartphone comparison to Apple. Whack my finger on that one, Jason.
But it's like
the only Android maker I know is Samsung. It took me like what, 35 seconds.
I will broaden your world.
In LG.
My response to you is this. I don't think that it's binary, right? If you were to put, say, happiness on the y-axis, right, and the number of choices on the x-axis, and you were to draw something out like a chart, right? I think ultimately the relationship would be parabolic, where up to a certain number of choices, you're definitely increasing in the number of happiness, right? Like, but like, I think past a certain point, past a certain level of customization, you do have, this kind of fall in happiness, because maybe the stress of choosing between such individualized choices, right? The cost of making that stressful choice is actually greater than the benefit realized by having the existence of that choice.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure,
right?
If there's one everyday thing that balances out all the time, it is restaurants, especially McDonald's, man. I'm there and I'm like, damn, dude, I'm glad I have options right now, but I would just also like just one or two that I know I'm going to go for, which I always end up doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, but then it really comes down to, and the reason I bring this up is, to what level does individualistic consumerism bring happiness, and then past what point is it just hedonistic indulgence that's not even really adding to like the overall societal fabric in the first place?
I agree with that.
Like where, right, and where does that fall on different products? And then is capitalism making an error in that way, in the sense that, like, what's going to happen 10 years from now? Are we just going to have tons and tons of proliferated little companies or independent contractors that are selling these products on Shopify with like no centralized retailer? And is that a future we want? I don't know. I just wanted to pick you guys' brain on that.
I'm all for killing Walmart. Just basically what they do to their employees is wrong. So,
Okay, no, we touch on a great point, Jason. I want to stay here. So do you think that it would be better if those employees of Walmart became kind of freelance independent contractors? Do you think that that would give them more negotiation power?
It might give them access to health insurance. It might give them access to a living wage. It might give them access to enough hours to sustain their family when they're like locked in a small town that Walmart is essentially killed and everything. And, there's like no other options but to work at Walmart. I mean,
all right. So three completely different issues, but all hugely important. Let's tackle them one by one. One, what do you guys think about employer-based health insurance?
As someone that used to be on it, I strongly disagree with that completely. I feel because it just ties you to your job even harder. Like the fear of losing your job is not just an economic impact; there's also a strong health impact on your overall well-being as a person. And losing one of those is already bad enough fundamentally. Like no one should have to go through losing both as one thing.
Well,
Yeah.
Me personally, I'm all for like socialized medicine and everything, but like the job that I'm in has a rider. I'm like in a union where I move from job to job with the WGA, and I still have the same coverage regardless of which job I go to. I can get fired off of a riding gig. I can get hired on by another one. My insurance stays the same. So I'm blessed because of the field that I'm in. But I'm all for socialized medicine. But right now we're in a country where, sadly people are tied to jobs and they need some type of insurance. So an employee-based insurance, it fills a need for now, until we can get something better.
So employer-based health insurance is supposed to be an incentive for you to work for the company. Like, hey, not only will we give you money, but we'll also give you good health care.
Exactly.
What it's manifested to is truly just something very, very ugly. It creates a burden on the employer since there's now a social expectation for employers to provide you your health care. And since they're the larger purchasers, that in theory, I guess, means that maybe they're going to give you a better, or like maybe they'd be able to get it at a better rate than you would individually when shopping. But that's not true at all. I'm actually quite surprised that more people just don't go for their own plans aside from employers. And before the Affordable Care Act, that was actually a lot more common. The Affordable Care Act, unfortunately, for all of the good things that it attempted to do, that was one of the bad things that it actually did do, which was make it much more difficult to get your own just simple personal healthcare insurance policy due to limiting the number of people that could provide insurance. Insurance coverage had to meet certain checkboxes, whether you actually wanted that coverage or not. And that forced a lot of companies to actually go under, and it just consolidated the giant insurance company magnate.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were already in the process of consolidating and everything because Blue Cross Blue Shield was coming through and buying everything. And then you have that new one, starts with a C. I forget the name of it, but it's like now Cigna. They're trying to buy everything, So, I mean, it was always consolidating, and it was always, like right now with car insurance, you have like basically 3-4 choices, as it is now, because it's the same process. People are just buying everything, trying to consolidate and become bigger.
My issue with employer-based insurance is that you really have large employers in there that are crowding up the marketplace and artificially inflating the price. So like by having like government actors, so like I used to work for the government, and I can tell you that there are millions of people that are working for the government, not for the paycheck, but because of the health insurance, because it's incredible insurance. And it's usually like, the number 2 breadwinner in the house will just take the government job, not for the pay, but because it has incredible insurance, because someone in the family's got a serious health condition.
Yeah. I was in the military. I actually have met quite a few people that enlisted basically like, my wife has cancer. I gotta take care of her, right? I can't afford cancer treatments on my own, so joining the military. And the military itself, they always try to provide care in-house. So you see a military doctor and all of that. And that's, as a rule of thumb, it's pretty garbage care, to be frank, because their incentive is to actually give you the least care possible because you're an expense. But although their incentive is to give you as minimal care, if they're not capable of providing the care, such as in the case of a lot of cancer treatments and whatnot, then they just send you to somewhere else, and they pretty much just foot the entire bill. Like if you're in the military, you and your immediate family of dependents are all completely covered. You pay nothing for whatever your healthcare requirement is, as long as you're active duty. And that is a big incentive to join for a lot of people. I would love a national insurance plan that did actually have you to have, like, first you'd have a little bit of skin in the game, like sure you have a little bit of a copay. But as a whole, if we were able to remove it from employers, so that way it's not a burden on the employer, and that way you're also not feeling obligated to, keep your certain job for your continuation of healthcare, I think that would be a phenomenal step in the forward direction. Alternatively, I think it's less discussed, but like just going back to free market principles would also be a step in the forward direction. I lean towards having a universal healthcare coverage because when you need healthcare, sometimes you're not in the shape to be making educated purchasing decisions. And that's what the free market is predicated on, right? Like you're not looking up, oh, this hospital has the best reviews when you're in the back of an ambulance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, like where we are right now is the absolute worst. If we were to go to a much more free market styled system for healthcare, that would also be a huge step forward. If you're able to go, hey, you know what? I need this medicine. I need this surgery. I need exactly this. How much is that going to cost you? And you tell you up front, and then you get to shop and compare at this hospital or this surgeon or whatever. Like we don't have that price transparency right now. We don't. And it would be a huge improvement if we did. A phenomenal improvement.
Right, but then you get into...
Well, you're not talking so much as a free market. You're talking so much more as just like price transparency, because when you buy health insurance, you're buying it for the in case shit happens. You're not buying it as you need it,
Yes.
So it's kind of like, and then, yeah, it's just like the price transparency would be fantastic. So you can so it can create competition, so you can see basically like what people are in fluctuating prices just for the hell of it, because they know that, you're not going to make the decision like when you're going, through whatever. And then like you said, when you're in the back of an ambulance, I mean, the hospital that they're could take you to, or the ambulance company that's like taking care of you, could charge $20 for the same IV that another one charges $10 for. But the price transparency you talk about would be freaking awesome. And especially if there's like federal oversight, keeping everyone sort of in line, kind of like how it is with gas prices. Like they're in line in the regions that they're in, if that makes sense.
So I have 2 points to make on that. One is the distinction between in-network and out-of-network is huge, right? In terms of like blocking the price transparency, because if something's in-network versus out-of-network, it just makes a huge change in terms of how far your personal coverage extends, right? And then another point is, and I think you hit this right on the head, Jason, the way that we conceptualize healthcare in the United States is to say, oh, when shit happens, let me take care of it, right? But that's why we actually have one of the best secondary healthcare systems in the world, but one of the poorest primary healthcare systems in the world. And that's also why we have one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world. Because secondary healthcare is exponentially more expensive than primary healthcare, right? And so what happens is we're very good, like Americans get their act together like after their first, sometimes their second heart attack, but they do, right? After things happen, the US person gets their health back on track. But it's after it happens, so the health outcomes are never ideal. And B, since it's after it happens, it's also exponentially more expensive for obviously that individual person, but also society as a whole, right? On multiple fronts, right? Whether it's, like the burden to the healthcare system or the loss of productivity of that individual while they're recuperating from said heart attack, right? So, I mean, the list goes on and on. What we really need to do is to improve, I think in terms of what we've been talking about, improve our primary healthcare system, and then to also kind of crush this distinction between in-network and out-of-network hospitals, or at least like minimize the distinction in pricing between in-network and out-of-network, so that we can kind of bring this price transparency.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought up the difference between primary and secondary care. So for anybody listening that doesn't know, secondary care is basically reactive, and primary care is a lot more proactive. And think of your annual, general checkup, and things along that nature, right? So there's this, I remember this Chinese parable. I won't remember it word for word, but on the lines, basically, you have this famous hotshot surgeon doctor that gets summoned by the emperor, and he's so famous, so the emperor says, "I hear that you're the best doctor in the land. Tell me, do you agree that you're the best doctor?" And the doctor says, "No, definitely not. My older brother is." And the emperor goes like, "But you're the best surgeon. People have come to you with, broken legs, and you've cured them, and all these different things." And the surgeon says, "Yes, but my older brother, saves the people before they need to see me." And like that is what we want. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And you're absolutely right, Isht, that our secondary care system is basically bar none. People from around the world come to the United States for any serious difficulty in care, because if you have the money, like we'll find a way to within any bounds of science, we'll find a way to get there.
Yeah, and
And there are
think
a lot
about
of
it, like,
acupuncturists and herbalists out there who are like, hey, within all realms of spirituality, we got you. So
yeah, you don't hear people in medical fields brag about like, oh, this country has the world's best fitness doctors. We should go there. No, it's always like some very difficult disease that you must face after the fact, and that's the whole problem.
And what's interesting is, what's called medical tourism, right?
Medical tourism.
Where now you for like regular medical operations, right? For like people in the U.S. who don't have like infinite amounts of money, they'll actually go to India, which is a very much like a favorite spot, or Thailand, or somewhere in South or Southeast Asia, in order to get healed, right? And to cover for that extensive rehab process and get their operations done elsewhere. And you guys were absolutely right. If you have infinite means and you're located outside the United States, you can come to the United States to get that cutting edge, novel healthcare operation completed in order to survive or to live a better life. So it's interesting to see individuals moving, across countries, obviously pre-COVID, in order to like address medical issues, which always.
Oh yeah, I was one of those people, man. I flew down to Peru many years ago to get my wisdom teeth pulled. It was significantly cheaper. I got to go to Peru, which is always fun, and the drugs are much harder, and it was great.
Ayahuasca will fuck you up, man. Like, I've been to Peru twice. The first time I went to Peru, I remember being on the plane and like asking the flight attendant, "So how much longer until we land?" And she telling, "Oh, it's going to be like another 4 hours." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I'm just like taking a nap. And then I remember like waking up from the nap, and I'm like, "So how much longer until we get to Peru?" And she's like, "We're headed back to Los Angeles, sir." And I'm like, "The fuck."
The altitude sickness is a real thing, man. Especially if you go up to
yeah, it was insane. So I had to go back to Peru a second time just to remember it. But yeah.
I had that experience one time too in real life about something. Anyways,
totally planned to go to South America during this summer. Like when we were in Iowa. Like I think actually.
Wait, did you tell me this?
Sorry? No, he talked about this. Like he wanted to go on vacation down to like South America.
Exactly.
I guess we were so busy in the middle of everything that I forgot, but we totally could have been in Peru at the same time. God damn it. I would be in Peru right now. Shit.
And then this happened.
Yeah, then like everything stopped.
Think about it. I could have like went to Puerto Rico for 2 weeks on like a winter vacation and everything, and not gone to Iowa, and probably not need a $60,000 back surgery right now.
Yo, 2020 has been the most rain-checked year of all time. All right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is just a giant pause, and honestly, I wonder where globalization goes after COVID.
Right? That's a good question.
I mean, and I wonder, do we retract? And we obviously have have to retract our supply chains, at least for certain essential products like pharmaceuticals. We have to localize those supply chains a little more because, I mean, it's evident after this experience that we were over reliant on China and India for those items at least. But how much do we pull back from globalization? How much do we change those supply chains? And how much do we stop, like, relying on other countries in order to like maximize output for every country involved, and say, okay, we'll actually take a hit on the maximum productivity that we can see and cooperate with that other country to a less or to a no extent, so that, like, we can localize the operations. Not just the United States, but it's really every single country in the world that's asking this question. And is it better to operate in a non-globalized world? Is it safer? What are the trade-offs, and where do everyday people kind of line up as a result of the entire process? Yeah. Those are just all huge questions in this post-COVID reality.
Ish, I want to follow up with you personally on a phone call because I have to get going, unfortunately. But you all keep going, and I'll catch the recording of the rest of this conversation later.
All right, have a good one, GP. Always good.
Peace. We just lost our sex appeal people.
I know, yeah. I mean, I guess we are over an hour, but and I know I just posed a pretty heavy question. Your call, Pierce, in terms of whether you guys want to take this or whether maybe we'll follow up in the next few weeks. Your call.
We'll give it a few more minutes. So
sure.
I say as we'll give it a few more minutes. Jason, if you want to tackle it, go ahead, or I'll say something else.
Oh, the globalization thing. I mean, I remember when we were the nation of isolation and everything, like back pre-World War II and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, going back to a little bit of that wouldn't be such a bad idea. I mean, we got all the good stuff. We got clarified butter from France. We got stuff. Yeah, pretty much just clarified butter is all we needed. So, and we got sushi and all the Asian food. But we got all that now. So give it a couple of decades underneath the nation of isolation, and see how things go. See if we start another civil war or kill ourselves or whatever.
Well, unfortunately, isolation as a whole doesn't seem to work out over history. Whether you look at Japan as an example, or whether you look at China as an example, or any number of other countries that have tried to go that route. Usually because they think that they're superior, but sometimes just because culturally they're, say, just not trusting or whatever. And what's happened historically has been other nations gained an advantage over the isolationist nation, and then it would, that advantage would be leveraged against them, whether it was economically or whether it was over warfare or any number of other things. So it's probably as a whole something we want to avoid. Not to mention,
not going for like an entire century or anything. I'm just like, maybe half a decade. Let us learn to be a little bit more self-sufficient to where we can actually get a fucking mask for our nurses and stuff.
Well, maybe what we can do, right? And maybe what we can do, and I completely agree, right, with both of you guys. Maybe what we can do is have a plan A and a plan B, right? Where the plan A is in a globalized society and in ideal conditions, we do agree with following a fully globalized modus operandi and having these globalized supply chains, and then taking maximum synergies between economies around the world, right? When things are going well. But in any other case, we have a plan B where we localize the supply chain, and we are not able to do so instantly, but maybe in just a month to 6 weeks, we localize the supply chain and we operate on a more local basis if we, right? So really, I think the question for me, the point for me is not one or the other, but both, to learn to operate in a globalized and in a self-sufficient way. And I think what's really important is the capability to change from that fully globalized format to a more self-sufficient format if the needs of the global needs or if the individual country needs call for it.
Yeah, depending on, say, what that is, a lot of those things are also, national security concerns and whatnot. The government, for example, realized that our space engines, like that we use for any rocket and a lot of those things, those are built in Ukraine. So then Russia decided to sort of invade Ukraine. And we go, oh, wait a second, maybe we won't have reliable access to this anymore, right? So that's a pre-COVID example of this, where we go, okay, well, this, I can't remember what company it was in Central America or the central United States that got it. But now we have a backup company that is able to produce certain engines that are at minimum somewhat functional. I really don't know the details of it, but I know that there was a resolution to this, problem question that we had. So this sort of thing happens all the time. You're asking at what level is this decision being made? Are we just talking about any individual company? Or are we talking about any governmental concern? And then at what point does a individual's company decision become a governmental concern? Because we've already heard lots of too big to fail sorts of things, right? Who makes our tanks? These are private companies that make our tanks, right? But
With
obviously the government
with government contracts, because, and I'm forgetting the name of the movie, but it has Jonah Hill in it, and it's it's about these
Jonah Hill, and then that one guy from that one movie about the boxing where he had to cut the weight.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got those guys in it, and it's a hilarious movie. And remember, the buyer is always the government. If the buyer is the government or hospitals or any other respective sector that's taking huge government subsidies or ultimately ending up with government money, I think that the government has the capability or should have the capability and the right to kind of direct them to convert their supply chains. So a few things about supply chains that we've learned through this crisis is, one is supply chains are very stubborn, right? They're very much ingrained and they're very difficult to switch out. I think somehow through more optimal supply chain management, we need to figure out a way to make supply chains more flexible. And then the second point is, I think ultimately, other than, of course, for essentials like government purchase products like tanks, anything related to the military industrial complex, healthcare, anything that's that essential and immediately necessary for your population, I think for those, the government, right, now I am kind of looking at this as a lawyer, because everything in law, in the way that judges kind of evaluate things, is it's a balancing test, right? So is the government's interest in making sure that the supply of an essential product is going strong and steady, does that outweigh an individual private company's decision to choose a supply chain, right? Because you're not asking a company to stop selling a product or to sell a different product. You're just asking them to exercise a different supply chain, which may ultimately hurt their profit margin by a certain percentage, but it's not it's certainly not so detrimental to their operations that they're in threat of shutting down, right? So the government interest there is strong enough. So that would be my point there. And then my second point, just real quick, is even if it is a purely private company, maybe they should have those two forms of supply chain just to make sure that they can hop between the two in order to protect their own profitability. Because you don't want to be reliant on just one single supply chain as your entire business.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies have realized that, and they've now decided to diversify their supply chain, or at the minimum have an insurance backup policy and whatnot. Anyway, I think it's probably a good time to call it. We could probably keep talking about this for a long time. So Isht, it has been a pleasure to have you back on. We'll have you on again soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. Adios, guys.
That's right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, and I'll see you later, Jason.
All right. Bye-bye.